What's up, Notjust developers? Welcome back to a new live stream. Today we are going to build the backend side of the OnlyFans application. So this application, we started it previous week. If you haven't checked that out, make sure to follow that first, where we build the user interface of the OnlyFans application. We're gonna get into that a bit later. But today we're gonna take that project and work on the backend side in order to have a working application from both ends. More specifically, we're gonna get started with Amplify. We're gonna set up our project there, and we're gonna get into the firstly authentication layer. We're gonna use the new authentication UI provider from Amplify to have full authentication flows with sign up, sign in, and so on. Then we're gonna get into the database modeling. We're gonna model everything, and then we're gonna query real data from the database in our application. And at the end, we're gonna get into the storage as well to make sure to upload pictures and images and to save them in cloud. So if you're excited, make sure to go ahead and follow the link in the description below to download the assets bundle, where you'll get code snippets and this PDF presentation that will help you move along today. And also you can follow the step-by-step guide on notjust.dev. You can find the link in the description below. So real quick, let's have a look at the application that we have built during the previous episode. And yeah, I think here we have it. So it's the home screen of the OnlyFans is going to display a list of users from which you can go ahead and view the profile. And here on the profile page is where we worked more on the user interface. We're displaying the information about the user, and we have a paywall right away here. So if you're not subscribed, you're not gonna see any posts. However, if you press subscribe, then you're gonna start seeing the posts that that user has created. So yeah, that's the simple screens that we have. And finally, one important screen that we're gonna work today with is the new post screen, where we can create new posts, upload pictures. And today we're gonna make sure to upload everything and save in database when a new post is created, and let our followers see them. So that's the plan for today. Are you excited about that? Let me know in the live chat. Hi guys, how are you doing today? Are you ready for it? In fact, for some reason, for 2 months or 3 months, I haven't worked with AWS Amplify, and I'm really excited to get back to it today. There are new updates to it. I partially saw some of them, and I'm excited to look into that. Thank you, Dreamland, for mentioning the URL. Hello, Evgen from Kiev. All right, guys. So let's get started, because we're gonna have some time to stop and talk with you. But yeah, let's go ahead and kickstart today's tutorial. So the first thing that you will need is an AWS account. If you don't have already, go ahead and create one. You can do that for free, and AWS provides a free tier, which most of the services that we're gonna use today, actually all of them, they are covered by the free tier. So just for testing and playing around in development, you're not gonna get charged. But make sure to double check the pricing pages for some of the services that we're using in order to be on the safe side. So after you sign in your AWS account, let's go ahead and search for Amplify on the top here. And go ahead and open the AWS Amplify page. From here, what we have to do is let's go ahead and create on the new application, and we're gonna choose build an application, not host a web application, but build an app. Here, let's give our app a name. So let's go with OnlyFans and confirm deployment. That's it. Now we will wait until Amplify sets up everything, and then we're going to be able to get started. While this is happening, let me show you what do you have to do in order to get the source code from the first day if you haven't followed that along. But as always, I recommend following along together to build the user interface first and then implementing the backend. In the description of this video, I have a link to the source code. It should be OnlyFans, this one. And go ahead and clone this repository. And after you cloned it, make sure to go to the UI branch. So after you clone this repository from here, open it in Visual Studio Code. Here I have it. And after you clone it, make sure to do git checkout UI to go ahead and start from the UI branch. Here, if you are experienced with Git, you can create a new branch based on this UI branch, or you can simply continue on this branch and you're gonna be good to go. Actually, I'm gonna go back to main, because at the moment of doing this, the main is the same as the UI, but later on the main will also include the source code for the backend. After that is done, of course, go ahead and install the dependencies with npm install, like this, and later we can start our development server with npm start. Let me probably zoom it a bit more. npm start. And from here we can run the application on either iOS emulator, on Android, or even on our physical device if you have Expo Go installed on your physical device. Hello Bangladesh, hello Oman, Senegal, from everywhere. All right. Yes, everything is working fine. Let's have a look if our application has been initialized on AWS Amplify, and I see that it finished initializing, and the next step is to simply launch the Studio UI. So press on this button, Launch Studio, and this will open in a new tab, the Amplify Studio. This dashboard is where we will spend most of our time, because this dashboard allows us to create and manage our backend infrastructure and also manage the data from our application. So we're gonna slowly go through all of this during today's tutorial, but yeah, like here in the setup, this is where we will set up our authentication, our data model, storage, and so on. And under the manage, it's where we will manage the content from the application. However, before we get started with that, let's go ahead and set up our pool. Let's go ahead and connect our React Native application with the backend that we just created. To do that, press on the local setup instructions here on the top, and from here go ahead and copy this Amplify pool app ID. Okay. Back in our application, go ahead and create a new terminal. In order not to close the one that is running our development server, we create a new one, and here we can go ahead and using the Amplify pool command, we can pull our backend here in our application. This will open a new tab in order to authenticate us, so just simply press yes, and you can close this one after it's logged in. Back in our Visual Studio Code, we simply have to select some of the options here to provide you with the best experience. For example, what editor we are using? We're using Visual Studio Code. We are writing JavaScript, and we are using React Native. For the rest, leave as the default. And when we are asked, do you plan on modifying this backend? Let's say yes, and also press enter. Now this will fetch the backend environment from the cloud, and we see successfully pulled backend environment staging from the cloud. And what did that create? Let's have a look. First of all, it created a new folder, Amplify, here in our application. And this is where most of the configuration and most of the backend code will live. I will see. In some cases, we don't have to work here a lot. In some cases where we have to adjust some things, we're going to come here and update it. But most of the changes to the backend infrastructure, we're going to do from the dashboard here. Besides this Amplify folder, in the source directory, we also have the AWS exports file. And this AWS exports is the configuration file that allows us to connect with our backend. We're gonna need this in the next step when we're going to connect and configure AWS Amplify. But before we do that, we actually need to install some libraries. I have these commands written here. Today I was going through the Amplify documentation and I said like it's really, it needs a lot of work. So I have all the commands that you have to run here in my Notion, but I didn't manage to publish it on the web. However, if you're watching this after the live stream was published, we're gonna put it on our notjust.dev website, all of this step-by-step guide, so you can find it in the description below and just follow, copy the command from there. Now, in order to show you where you can find this command, let's open the Amplify documentations. And these commands for installing, let me find them actually. Because everything is all over the place. Okay, here they are. So in the Amplify documentation, if we go to the Getting Started guide, make sure to choose React Native from this list, React Native. And in the Setup a Full Stack project, here is where they are showing all the libraries that we will need to install. Just copy the libraries without npm install because we are going to install them using Expo. So I'm going to copy all of them from here like this. And back in our terminal, let's go ahead and run npx expo install and paste all the libraries. These libraries are starting with, oh, come on. No. It's the AWS Amplify core library, then the Cognito library for Identity.js, the netinfo that provides information about the network connectivity, the async storage that helps Amplify store data on the storage of a device, and the core.js that will provide us with a polyfill library a little bit later. So let's just install them. How are you liking Expo Router so far? I'm still getting used to it. To be honest, I really like Expo Router, and as you saw, like in the last couple of projects that we'll build, we are using Expo Router just because it's so easy to set up all of these screens. When previously, like in order to explain navigation, I had a separate chapter in every project where I spent like probably at least 40 minutes just to explain how to install all the navigators, how to connect them, how to write these navigation files. But now the challenge probably is to understand the concept of Expo Router. But then when you understand the concept, using it, it's quite easy. You simply create a file, it automatically sets up the route for it, and you can navigate there. And I think it's much more, you are able to move faster. So we see that our dependencies have been installed. So let's go ahead and close this. And speaking about Expo Router, if we're looking in the documentation of Amplify, they are recommending to, I don't even see that here, but yeah, here. We are saying that we need to configure Amplify in the app.js. And that's true if you're using React navigation or if you are not using Expo router, because in that case you'd have app.js. However, with Expo router, there is no app.js here. So what will be the file where we can set up these global providers? Well, that file in Expo router is going to be the root layout. So I talked about layout in when I was explaining Expo router, so you can check out the specific video about Expo router on my channel. But these layouts are basically files that wrap everything inside the navigation, specifically inside that level of navigation. So if we are creating it in the root directory of our application, not root directory of our application, but in the app directory, this is going to be our root layout. So let's create the layout.js. And because it's at this level, all other pages in our application, they will be wrapped by this layout. So here is a perfect way to add things like global providers, React context, and so on. So let's go ahead and start by exporting default root layout. And this is going to be a function. Save. If I do that, I see a white screen. Why? Because by overriding the layout, now we need to specify like what navigator to use for this level. So by default, if we don't have a layout, it automatically is using the stack navigator. Now, because we didn't specify, because we created this root layout, we need to specify ourselves that the navigator that it should use is stack navigator imported from Expo router. If we do that, we are back to normal. But at the moment now, the stack navigator added the headers. So what we can do, the same way as we were able to configure navigators in React navigation, same way we are doing here with screen options, header shown, come on, false, we are hiding it. And that's because behind the scenes, Expo router is actually using React navigation. So all the screen options and options are also available here, and we can adjust everything about our navigation. So now we are back to normal, but this root layout, if I do here console log app is running, is going to be called for, is going to wrap all our screens. So we see app is running. If we go to another page, it's still there. So as I was saying, this is the place where we can go ahead and configure Amplify. For that, let's go ahead and import, first of all, Amplify from AWS Amplify, and we need the configuration for it. The configuration, I showed you that it's under source AWS exports. So let's go ahead and import this. AWS config from a directory app, because we are in the app directory, we need to go in the source directory. Then let's go to source, and from here AWS exports. Last step is to put them together and call amplify.configure and pass there the AWS config file. That's it. Now our AWS Amplify is configured, and it's ready for us to implement different libraries that we will need. For example, the next one is going to be our authentication. So let's go ahead and set up our authentication, because that's the first step that we need to take. For that, we're going to open Amplify Studio, and from the setup, let's choose authentication. Here is where we can set up our authentication layer. We can specify how do we want people to log in. I'm gonna leave the email login as default. And also we can configure the sign up. For example, I want to add a couple of extra fields. For example, I want to add the name of a user to be selected and saved in on our authenticated user, and also the nickname, which in our application is going to be the handle, right? So yeah, I think that's what I need here. And I can go ahead and deploy this, but I also want to open the password protection settings and to make sure that the password for this project is going to have less rules, because this is for development, so it's gonna be easier for me to set up passwords. For you, you can leave them by default, or you can even increase the difficulty of a password that the users will require to set when creating an account in your application. So now we're gonna wait until the authentication is set up and deployed. And usually on this part, I explain a bit how everything works behind the scenes, because AWS Amplify is basically a group of existing services from AWS, and AWS Amplify is just simply helping us integrate with those services. It's helping front-end and mobile developers integrate with those services. So for example, now when we are setting up our authentication, as we can see here in this animation, we're showing something about AWS Cognito user pool. And in fact, that's the service that is being used behind the scenes here, Cognito user pool, in order to set up our authentication layer. So if you want to learn actually more and get into more depth, if you're interested in how Cognito is working, you can read documentation about AWS Cognito, Customer Identity and Access Management. This is the one. You can right away see here that it has a free tier of 50,000 active users per month. And you can look at how it works, how it manages users, how it authorizes them, and so on. But yeah, that's if you are comfortable with that, or if you're interested in how it works behind the scenes. For everything else, like AWS Amplify makes everything abstract, and we don't have to know a lot of implementation details behind the scenes. So now our authentication has been created, which means that our AWS Cognito user pool has been created behind the scenes and is ready to be used in our application. For that, we have to pull again the backend, as you do like with a Git repository. So when changes happen, we need to pull. Let's copy that command and do amplify pull again. And it shows that before pulling, we don't have any categories here. After that, we have an authentication category. And if you look at the source AWS exports, now it contains a little bit more configuration, specifically about Cognito, setting up Cognito. Perfect. Okay, so at the moment, we have pulled and our backend is ready for our application to add the authentication layer. The next step is to actually add this authentication layer. There are actually two ways we can implement that. One of these ways is to manually design and create the authentication screens if you have a very specific design, or if you already have these authentication screens. And in that case, you would simply integrate with the authentication class that is imported from AWS Amplify, and this authentication class has a lot of methods. For example, auth.signin or sign up. Sign up, and here you would provide the parameters like a username and a password. It also has sign in and so on. But in this case, like, you'd have to do a lot of things yourself to hook your forms with these API calls to make sure to handle the errors correctly and so on. So even though it's possible to have a very customizable authentication flow, in this tutorial I'm going to show you an easier way, a way that where Amplify will do a lot of work, and we can just enjoy building our features. So for that, Amplify has, if we go into the docs, where are the docs? Amplify docs. Let me open it up here. So yeah, for that, if you look here at the top, there is docs and there is this UI library. Yes, we're going to use the Amplify UI library, which provides with predefined screens and components for some of the default or basic flows, including, or actually I would say that at the moment for React Native, if we go here to React Native, the UI library mostly focuses on the authenticator. And this authenticator is going to help us display the authentication flow without a lot of troubles. Yeah, again, the getting started guide here is not one of the best. You can try to follow it along, or let's go ahead and I'm going to show you what library you have to install. Let's go ahead and do npx. Let me clear npx expo install, and we're going to install the AWS Amplify /UI React Native, as you can see here, and then the React Native safe area context. Again, if you are following the step-by-step guide on notjust.dev, you can copy it right away from there. Let's go ahead and install these two packages. In the past, previously, this was done with hook with authenticator. However, AWS Amplify removed that with authenticator in favor of their UI library. I'm still not sure how I stand about that, but yeah, let's see how it goes. Because this UI library at the moment, like, it's quite limited. It only has the authenticator and the in-app messaging. Let's see if, yes, our two libraries have been installed, and we are ready to actually add authentication in our application. So for that, what we will need the authenticator. Okay, let's go ahead and import. We are also in the layout.js because we need to protect our whole application with the authentication screen. So let's import authenticator from AWS Amplify UI React Native. Like this. And what we have to do is we will wrap our stack navigator, which contains all the screens from our application. We will wrap it in two components. The first one, let me add the brackets here. The first one is going to be authenticator.provider, and the second one is going to be the authenticator itself. Just like that. And inside the authenticator, we will put the stack screen. Now, with this approach, we right away see the sign-in screen on the left, on the right. And before we reach our stack screens and any of the screens from our application, we should first make sure to basically go through this gate, through the authentication gate. So we need to create an account, sign in, and only then we're going to be able to use the stack screens. So yeah, that's how the authentication works here, and we are ready to go ahead and create an account. The good thing is that now with a new update, the fields that we have set for our users, like the name and nickname, they are automatically parsed and rendered in this form. So yeah, that's a bit better than it was with Authenticator hook. Let me go ahead and create. I'm gonna create a new account here. Team. Let's go ahead and create the account. And we see that they emailed me and I should receive a confirmation code. All of this is implemented by default. So it's really easy to have this authentication flow with multi-factor authentication. Come on. Like this, and we can confirm. And after that, we are right away redirected to our application. The next time the user will sign in the application, will open the application, he will be remembered and he will not have to go through the authentication flow again. He will go right away to the home screen. Yes, that's how easy I would say it is to implement authentication. Let me know what do you think about the new authenticator. And if you already work with it in your project, let me know what was your experience. I also want to show you a very common use case, how you can sign out from the application, because we are here, but if we want to go through the sign-in process again, like how do we do that? Should we reinstall the application? Yeah, that would work, but that's not the best approach to do it. Let's go ahead and add somewhere the sign out button, and I will simply put it probably on the index.js page here, and after the new post link, let me add a text with sign out, and I have to make sure to import this text from React Native. And yeah, when I press on this sign out button, I want to sign the user out, obviously. To do that, we will need the use authenticator hook. So import use authenticator from AWS Amplify UI React Native. Using the user authenticator, we get access to a lot of data about authenticated users, also some functions, and including the sign out function. So let's destructure the sign out function from this hook. And when we press on this sign out button on press, I want to call sign out. Sign out. And let's give it a try. If I press sign out, I am back to the screen and I can go ahead and log in. Another cool thing that is a small step, but I think very important for the user experience, is that after creating and confirming an account, you are automatically signed in. Where before, after you create an account, you confirm it, you were redirected back to the sign-in screen and you had to sign in the application. So small thing, but good to have it. All right, okay. So with that authentication, we are done. If you are interested in more, to learn more about the authenticator and how you can customize it, you can go ahead at this UI library documentation, and there is the customization here where you can check how you can customize different components, including the, the theme. you can style it and provide different colors for those buttons, different background, different sizes, and so on. That's also possible. But now let's go ahead and move to the next step. And the next step is going to be about database. So we need to set up our database, including our API. And instead of taking the data that we at the moment are taking from these assets, dummy data, like this array of posts, what we want to do is we want to actually query real posts from the database, from using the API. So to set up our data model in Amplify Studio, let's go ahead and add the setup data. And here is where we will first design how our models should look like. What data do they need to have? Then we're going to set up the relationship between them. And after that, we're going to start querying them and submitting data to our database. Let's go ahead and start by defining our first model, which is going to be our user. And to know what information do we need about the user, the best place to look at it is looking at our dummy data. So let's open SS data users. And here we see all the information about the user. Let me go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start with a name. By default, it has an ID, and this is going to be the unique identifier of our user. Later, we're going to add the name. And as we can see, the type here, we can choose different types, but string is what we are interested in. And also, on the right, we see two checkboxes, is required and is array. Name is not an array, but we can make it required and make sure that all the users that we save in database, the name for the name is a required field. Let's go ahead and continue with a handle. This one as well is required. And you can check in the type here. If you press is required, there is an exclamation mark at the end, and this is coming from GraphQL. In GraphQL, every time something, a field is required, it has like this exclamation mark at the end. So that's a little hint to see and check. Besides the handle, it has a bio, and I think the bio should not be required. What else? The avatar as well, let's not make it required, because when people sign up, maybe they don't have an avatar, as well as the cover image, which is a string, is not required. And lastly, we have the subscription price, which is not a string, but it's a float number. So let's go ahead and add subscription price. And it should be a float, and let's make it required. And when creating a new user, we're going to initialize it with 0, but let's make sure that everyone has this subscription price. After that, like this is all the data that we will need about the user. Perfect. Let's go ahead and create one more model, because we have users can create posts in the application. And a post, if we look at the dummy data here, a post has, besides the information about the user that we're going to cover with relationship in a moment, the post has text, image, and likes. It also has this created at, but we're not going to add it because it's automatically added, and we're going to see in a moment how. So text, image, which I'm not going to make required, and likes. Likes is an integer, and let's make the likes actually required. Should we make the text required? Yeah, let's go ahead and make it required. Yeah, and if it's nothing, we're gonna just send an empty text. But yeah, it doesn't matter. Let's not overcomplicate. Let's leave it like this. As I said, we're not going to add the created at, because by default, Amplify will add a couple of more fields to our posts, and created at is one of the fields that it's going to add, including updated at that will represent when was the last time this model was updated. So these are the defaults, so we don't want to mess with them. And finally, after we have created the models, it's time to see what will be the relationship between these models. How do they connect between each other? So in our case, our users will create posts. And when talking about relationships between models, you should think about the cardinality. How many users, how many on the one side and how many on the other side. In our case, one user can create multiple posts, but one post is created by one single user. So for that reason, our cardinality is one-to-many. So let's go ahead and add this one-to-many relationship under the user with the post model, and let's choose one user to many posts. Let's click save. And by doing this, automatically under the post model, we see the user ID here, which is coming from a relationship source. This is exactly what we need. And I think for now we are good and we can create save and deploy. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Save and deploy. Deploy. So now Amplify behind the scenes will go ahead and using AppSync, which is a service that allows us to create REST and GraphQL APIs, we'll go ahead and also create DynamoDB as the database layer for basically for every single model that we defined previously, which is posts and users. Amplify will create one DynamoDB table. So later on, like this DynamoDB table, I think I'm going to show you because in a lot of cases, we really want to look into the data underneath our application and see exactly what's in our database, maybe to debug, maybe to see how it saves everything, or if something is not working to see why. So let's wait until everything is set up, and then we're going to be ready to work with it. If I was to build a real application and use Amplify, will it not cost a lot? The answer to that question is it depends. Well, yeah, like actually it depends on a lot of factors. Like a lot of AWS services, they are priced per usage. So the more the services are used, the more you're gonna be charged. So the more users you have in the application, the more requests, the more data, the more images they are sending, and so on, the more you're gonna get charged. To understand like all the services that we are using, including like, for example, DynamoDB, this is the service that is going to help us, that is going to be responsible for our database. So we can go ahead and look at the DynamoDB pricing, and it will show us how the DynamoDB is priced, and also how, yeah, there is the calculator. I think it also should show how much the free tier covers. Free tier covers 25 gigabytes of data storage for the tables using DynamoDB, and 2.5 million stream read requests, and 100 gigabytes of data transfer out to the internet. Also, there is some basic examples of some applications, so you can have a look and basically understand. The challenge is that you have to look at all the services and check the pricing, because yeah, like this is just for the database. Then your files, for example, you're going to store them on S3 pricing. S3 pricing as well here. Amazon S3, they offer you 5 GB of free storage and 20,000 GET requests for free each month, I think. And yeah, the pricing. The S3 is actually quite affordable. But yeah, that's how you would check and see how much your application is going to get charged. As a real example, like the startup that I was working before, we had around 20,000 users and our bill was a bit under $100 per month. But at that point, we were using some extra services that maybe you can avoid. But I needed them, for example, some recommendation services and so on that were helping us improve the engagement in our application. So for that, for 20,000 users, it's not actually a lot to pay $100 for the infrastructure. All right, so our data model has been deployed and we are ready to go ahead and pull the changes in our application. So let's copy that command, come back here and paste the command to amplify pull. Can we edit these screens? For the authentication, yeah, there are multiple ways you can adjust both authentication screens. The easiest one is using the theme provider. I showed there like how you can send some parameters to change the colors and so on. You can also override some of the default components in those screens. Or if you need like full customization, like if you need full flexibility, you can implement your screens and use the auth.signin, auth.signup, and all of these methods to manually call the authentication API. So, all right, after pulling it, we see a new category here for the API. Perfect. Let's close everything. And before we go ahead and start actually querying some data in our application, let's go ahead and open our content tab in Amplify Studio. Go ahead and open content. And here is where we can manage the data in our application. So for example, if we select the table users from here, we can go ahead and auto-generate some data. Let's go ahead and start with generating 3 users and you can also add some constraints for each field. So for the name field, we can say that, yeah, give me a random name. For the handle, give me maybe a random first name to have like only one word. For bio, give me a paragraph length of text. And for what? Avatar and cover image, this is something that we cannot define here in auto-generated data, but subscription price is something that we can generate and provide the range from 0 to 30. And if we press generate data, right away, it's going to generate the number of items that we specified there. So yeah, this is our users in our database. With this, we are ready to go ahead and query them on our homepage here. And to do that, let's go ahead and open up and index.js, because this is where our flat list of users lives. So, before we get into the querying stuff, we will need a state variable that is going to keep track of our users. because initially we don't have any users. So users set users equal use state empty array. Initially we don't have any users. Let's make sure to import use state from React like this, and we can go ahead and remove this import statement that was working with dummy data. Now we don't see anything on the screen because like the users, we initialize it with an empty array. The next step is to go ahead and query our users. When do we want to do that? We want to do that when this component mounts, when this page mounts. So for that, we're gonna use a use effect. And for a use effect, if you give empty dependency array, the use effect is going to be called only once when the component mounts. So that's exactly where we want to fetch users. To fetch users, we're going to use data store, which is an AWS Amplify library that helps us query our database. So datastore.query, here we need to provide the model that we want to query. Where do we get the model? Well, if you look at the source, Amplify for us automatically created this models file, and these models files contain the definition for our post and user, the two models that we defined previously. So what we have to do is first we have to import this user model from directory app source models. Now we can go ahead and say like data store query our user, and when you get the results from our users, go ahead and set them in state using the setter set users. If I save that and refresh my application, we see possible unhandled promise rejection. Let's have a look why. Cannot read property message of undefined. I think I forgot. Yes, we see a type error. Data store async iterator is not defined because I forgot to import a polyfill. So to fix that issue, open index.js, and before importing expo.router, let's go ahead and import one polyfill library from core.js/full/symbol /async iterator. This is a function that is missing and we need to polyfill it. Now, if I do refresh, it should work. Yes, we see 3 users with the names that are coming from here. Yes, their images are not working because at the moment the images are not actual URLs to images, but we can fix that by copying some actual URLs from here. For example, this one. If I change here as the avatar and I change the name to submit, if I refresh now, one of the users should have the avatar. Yes, perfect. It's working. So that's how easy it is to query using data store. So basically we import data store from AWS Amplify and the model that we want to query. And by putting them together using datastore.query and the model, in this case user, this is async function. You can also work with a wait here, but because it's in a use effect, like you have to wrap it in a separate function. But yeah, like specifically in this case, it's much easier to use the .then and simply pass there the setter for our state, and this is going to be called when we receive the users from the API. hero is asking, hey Vadim, in which time we can become a full stack developer? Well, that depends a lot on yourself and how much time you dedicate and invest to this, how much experience you already have, and yeah, also how easy it is for you to grasp these things. The way I recommend you to achieve this is to build as many projects as possible, because by actually implementing the knowledge into practice, that's how you actually learn and evolve and make sure that what you're learning actually sticks. Because a lot of times you just read, you watch a video and you say like, oh yeah, actually it makes sense. And then when you actually have to start working on a project, or when you get a job and have to do something, you feel like stuck, like there is a lot of knowledge in your brain, but you don't know how to get started. You don't know how to put everything together. So for that reason, that's what I'm trying to do here on YouTube, to provide free education. And also that's the method that we are using at the Academy, where you can join at notjust.dev, at the academy.notjust.dev. And there we go way more in depth into building projects, building production-ready projects, and covering this end-to-end aspect of building mobile applications, starting from basically having a design and then all the way until the application is in the hands of the users. So yeah, we are covering there. Half of it is the back is the front end with React Native. We focus a lot there on React Native, on how to build beautiful user interfaces. Then we get into the backend, but there we actually cover way more in depth. For example, for the authentication, we have one module where we have around 10 videos going very in depth in how to customize and create all of these authentication flows yourself, how to provide different types of authentication, like authenticating with social providers, with Google, Facebook, and so on. So yeah, we are going there pretty much in depth, and at the end you have an application on the market. Yeah, if you're interested in that, if you're on the way to become a full stack mobile developer, make sure to check out academy.notjust.dev. We're gonna leave a link in the description below. And back to our project now. What is our next step here? So we are querying this data. Let's go ahead and actually query the details of a user, because at the moment, if I press on one of these users, we see user not found. Because if we look at the application user id.js, what we are doing here is, again, we are working with dummy data. So instead of working with dummy data, let's go ahead and query the details of a user using data store. So for that, let's import data store. Let's import the user model from source models, and let's define the state variable for the user. So user set user equal use state. Initially, yeah, it's going to be null or undefined. And instead of looking through the dummy data for the users, I'm going to comment this out because this is the old way of doing. And I can also delete the dummy data import here at the top. We can go ahead and in a use effect, when this component mounts, we need to query that data about the user. In fact, not when this component mounts, but when this ID from the search parameters, basically the ID from the URL, when this changes, we need to query a new user. So let's go ahead and add this ID to the dependency array. And here we're going to go with datastore.query. We remember that we pass here the model user, but previously when we did that, it returned us all the users. However, we are interested in querying the user using this ID. Well, to do that, it's simple. You pass it as the second parameter. And if the second parameter is a string, this is going to be the identifier that will work to query specifically that user. So after that is done, we can, what's happening here? I think it should work. Let's do set, or let's do van. We're gonna set user. Set user like this. So with this, let's go ahead and try to press on one of these users. So if I press on Elon, yes, it works, and actually it has a very long bio. I don't know why. And I cannot, because it has a very long bio, let me go to this bio and restrict how many rows it can have. Where is the bio? User profile header. In the user profile header, let me find bio here. And for this text, I'm gonna do number of lines. Let's limit it to 5 because it's too much. Yes. Now we can press on the subscribe, which is a very weird number. And again, to fix that, we can also do subscription price. Here, subscription price. We can go ahead and do subscription price dot to fixed 1. And this will display only 1 digit after the 0, or we can do to fixed 2 to display 2 digits after the dot. And yeah, just like that, we have queried the information about our user, including their name, their handle, the bio, and so on. The posts are not yet queried, but we're gonna get there because we still need to do something. Perfect, it works. Why don't you use React Native CLI? I think I will create a video specifically with this title. Why don't you use React Native CLI? Because it's way more easier to build React Native applications with Expo, and there is almost no downside to using Expo for building your application nowadays. That's the easy and simple answer. Can we customize the front end and deploy the app as ours? I think you can, but yeah, like at the end of the day, this is a educational build. The purpose of this build is for educating you and for teaching you React Native and Amplify and how to build full stack applications. But if you go ahead and based on this application, you add additional features and you make it as a complete application, yeah, I think you should be fine. Like you will not have any issues with me. And I think the design is quite far from the actual design of OnlyFans. OTP authentication with Firebase. Yeah, maybe. Cannot promise. Because if I promise, you're gonna come after me. How are you doing? I'm good, thank you. How are you? I think Expo has hidden cost when you reach a certain amount of builds. No. Expo is free. EAS, which is the cloud build service, they have a paid plan that allows you to build your application in cloud. The thing is that you don't have to use EAS. You can build your application on your local machine, the same way as you build your React Native application, and deploy them manually. If you want to have like automatic builds, and every time you push the code to create a new build behind the scenes using EAS, which I think is very, very powerful and it saves you a lot of time, because every build you have to do, it takes you probably 1 or 2 hours at least. And you can automate everything with CI/CD, and every time you submit a new code to your repository, you create a new deployment, you build your project, you send it to the markets and so on. So it's quite powerful, but it's optional, like you don't have to use it. It's not what Expo is. Have you been thinking about doing a portfolio review video? Do you guys want me to do a portfolio review video? Haven't thought about that. Let's do a poll. Okay, so let's, I really like talking, guys. Leave your comments in the live chat and we can have some pauses a bit later. But now let's continue with our application, because the next step is something I wish we didn't have to do, and something I wish was way more easier with AWS Amplify. I don't want to get into a rant here, but I almost had a meltdown before the live stream just because of this situation. And let me explain why. So, to explain the problem, let me explain how everything works and how everything is connected. Remember, I was saying that for our authentication, basically when we create an account there, Amplify is using AWS Cognito. And AWS Cognito is responsible for authentication, basically allowing you in the application or not, and managing your account, passwords, sending notifications, and so on. This is the responsibility of Cognito. The data is also about the users is also managed by Cognito, and you can look here in the user management. We have this account Vadim notjust.dev. Now, a lot of applications require some connections between users and data, including our application. Our application, if we look at the data, we have posts and users, and we need a relationship between them. We need to query all the users. And these requirements of managing users at the database layer makes us require us to manage users on database level as well. So that's why we created this user model, and in the content, like, we have users. This is our database layer. The problem is that the database layer here from the content is not synchronized in any way with the users from Cognito. They're two separate independent services, and there is no easy way to say, like, hey, for every user that signs up in my application, go ahead and save his information in the database. That's what I want, like, as simple as that. Like, I don't know, like, and so many applications actually needs these features. But no, there is no easy way to do that. And we have to basically manually handle this situation. Now we get into different possibilities. There are multiple ways of doing that. There is the right way, and the right way of doing this is creating a Lambda function, hooking it up as a trigger to AWS Cognito, and every time user signs up in Cognito, this will trigger the Lambda function. The Lambda function will write the data in the DynamoDB database. Writing data in DynamoDB database is quite, I would say, not user-friendly. You would also have to manage the permission of that Lambda to have access to the database. So it's a bit complicated for beginners, and I don't want to overly complicate this build, and I don't want to scare you with this. But that's the right way. So if you know what I was talking about like so far, I think you can figure it out, and we have actually done it in a couple of times. Actually, in our full stack mobile developer course, like we are covering this use case because we have a time there to talk for me to explain you what is a Lambda function, how they are connected, how to give these permissions, how to set it up, how to work directly with DynamoDB. But here I don't have this time because it will take like probably 1 hour just to do that. So there is other ways. But these ways, like what we can do is in our application, we can basically listen for sign-in update. Let's say we can listen to sign up events, and every time a user signs up and we hear this event in our application, we can go ahead and save the user in the database. Okay, let's try to do that. But the problem is that the sign up event does not include the details about the user. So that's not what we need. We need details about the user. Let me actually write it down because I'm preparing some feedback for the AWS Amplify team. So the sign up event does not include info about the user. Why? I need it. And it's there. Like, I don't understand the reason why it's not included. So, okay, let's use the things that we have. So we're gonna listen to sign-in events, and basically every time the user signs in our application, we will check if he's not in the database, we will save it there. Sounds pretty simple, and it's a bit more manageable because everything is going to be done from our Expo application. Before that, I think I can go ahead and do a commit here. Set up Amplify, auth, and data. Listening to events, again, we're going to do that in the layout file where we configure and basically in the file that wraps our whole application. Listening to events, Amplify has this hub, so we can import hub from AWS Amplify, and the hub allows us to listen to different events that are happening with our backend. Events such as sign in, sign up for the authentication, for the data like saving, synchronizing, and so on. Like you can hook into a lot of events that are happening. So that's exactly what we need. We need to set up the hub listener when the application mounts. So for that, we need the use effect. And here, let's put the parentheses. Now, let's set it up, hub.listen. And you need to listen to one channel. The channel is basically the, in this case, is the service that we want to listen to, and this is the authentication channel. Then we need a callback function that is going to be called every time the authentication channel will receive a new event. So data, let's go ahead and console log data. Before we do anything with this, every time you subscribe to some event, you should make sure to unsubscribe when the application is closed or refreshed and so on, in order not to have memory leaks. So in order to, this is how we subscribe to the event. And if you remember from use effect documentation, the function that we return at the end of a use effect is going to be the function that is called when we want to clean up function. the function that is going to be called when the component unmounts. So everything here is executed when it's mounted. This is when it's unmounted. So how do we remove a listener? Well, we get access to this remove listener equal hub.listen, and here we just call this remove listener. Okay, perfect. And also I would like to do JSON.stringify data, and here null and 2 in order to see it nicely in our console. Okay, we see something already. Channel authentication, event configured, data null, message, the auth category has been configured. Perfect. If I press on the sign out, we see channel authentication, payload, event sign out, and the data of a user that is signing out. Perfect. If I sign in, and if I sign in here, I see payload, event, sign in. This is the event that we are interested in. This is when we want to try to save this user to database. And if you look at the, it should have also attributes. Attributes, this one, attributes. With a sub, with a name, nickname, and email. Okay, so let's do a check here. If data.payload.event is equal to sign in, then we need to execute something here. Well, first of all, let's get the user info. User info equal to data.payload. It's the attributes that I was showing you there. Like if we scroll up a bit, it's these attributes. And if we look there under the payload data.attributes. Data payload, then data again, then attributes. So let me console log them here, user info, like this. So now, because it's in the if statement, if I press on the sign out, I shouldn't see any console log. I still see them, not good. I think because it keeps the previous one open, right? And when I sign in, we see the information about the user that just signed in. Perfect. So far, so good. The next step, you would think it's easy. Like we would save it into the database using data store. So you would do data store dot save new user, and here you'll provide all the details like the name and so on. Well, let me tell you why this is not gonna work. The thing is that we need a way to logically connect a user from our cognito, from our authentication layer, to a user from the database. Because in the next place, like in the next steps, we would want to see like, is this my user? Am I allowed to, I don't know, do something? Or give me all my posts. Like all of this information, the information about signed in user we're gonna get from the authentication layer, and the rest of the information we're gonna get from the database layer. So we need a way to logically connect them together. The identifier of a user is this ID, and it's going to be easy to query users by ID. But how do we connect it to the user from authentication? Well, the cognito also has a unique identifier for the users, And that identifier is called the sub, which stands for subject, I think. So this is the identifier of my user incognito. Not incognito, but in the cognito service. Our goal is to set the ID of a user from the database with the same ID from here. And in that way, we are logically connecting them together, and we will be able to get information from the database based on the user from cognito, right? Perfect. And yeah, you would say, okay, let's go ahead and say ID is equal to user info dot sub. Here we need it to be an object. Cannot find user. Go ahead and import it from source models. Don't tell me that now you're gonna work. No, of course you're not gonna work. User, yeah. Yeah, what I wanted to say is that with data store, there is no way to override the ID. And this is the problem here, because it would be much more easier to save this user with data store. But because we cannot override the ID, there is no way to synchronize in a good way our database user with our authentication layer user. So I'm gonna comment this out, and I'm gonna explain you another way to interact with your database. Welcome to using some hacks to make something so easy and so simple that should be done kind of automatically. So because we cannot use data store, it doesn't mean that that's the only way to interact with our database. We can directly interact with our database using GraphQL. If we go to the content here, this is another thing that we added recently, and I really like it. From Amplify Studio, we can test our GraphQL API. So at the top, manage content, we can press test GraphQL API. And here we can write directly queries and mutation, GraphQL queries and mutations. It remembered my mutation from the previous time, but yeah, like we can, it's basically, it's not gonna look like this for you, but yeah, I will put this mutation in the description, in the step-by-step guide, not to write it together, but basically these mutations allow us to run this GraphQL mutation to create a user. So what we are doing here is we are providing an input that we specify the details down below using variables. And here, yeah, like we're specifying the ID, the name, the handle, subscription, everything. With GraphQL, we can provide an override the ID in order not to have auto-generated IDs. So that's specifically why we needed to use directly GraphQL. And this is the field that we are requesting back after the user is created. I think we can go ahead and in the docs here for mutation, create user. Let's check the user. It's okay. Never mind. We can try to execute this mutation by pressing this plus button, and we see that it created a user with ID hello, Vadim, and handle this one. If we go to the manage content, to the users tab, I think we should see that here. Let me refresh it. Maybe we're not gonna see it because the ID is not like a number, it's like hello. I don't know why it shouldn't work. Yeah, it works. So we see the new user here with the ID hello, name, and so on. So now that we know that it's possible to run this GraphQL operation to create a new user, let's copy this GraphQL operation. Let's bring it here in our React Native application. Let's save it into a variable, create user mutation equal, it's going to be a string, and I'm going to paste that mutation here. The last step is to go ahead and in our listener here, where we have to save user to database. Let's go ahead and first define the new user object, and it should be similar to how we define it here in the variables. So as the input here. So it should have ID, it should have name, handle, and subscription price. ID, name, handle, subscription. For the ID, you remember we need the user info.sub. For the name, we will say user info.name. Handle is going to be user info dot. Instead of handle, it's going to be nickname, because this is the field from Cognito that is will be responsible for our handle. And subscription price, let's leave it for 0 as a default. Now that we have the data about the user, we can go ahead and do a wait, but because we do a wait, we need to make this function async. And we need to call the API module that should be imported from AWS Amplify here. So now let's go ahead and call api.graphql. And here, what we need to do is we need to provide the query. And the query is, this create user mutation. And besides the query, it also needs variables. The variables, if you remember, should have a field input with the details about the user. So variables should have input with the information about the user, new user, like this. Let's do that, and let's say console log user saved in database. Let's open our terminal. Let's sign out, and let's try to sign in again and see if our user from Cognito is going to be saved in our database. So I'm gonna do Vadim notjust.dev, sign in. Come on, here is the information about the user, and user saved in the database. I see this log, which means that everything probably worked correctly. I can go to the content, management content, and refresh this page to see if it indeed saved my user there. And let's look at the users. There is this Vadim with hello, which was done manually, so I can delete this one with ID hello, but the other one, this one, is the actual user that is coming from Cognito. Perfect. So finally, we have connected them together. There is one more extra case like you would have to handle. For example, now if I'm going to try to do it again, sign in, it will say possible unhandled promise rejection, create user, the conditional request failed. Basically saying that we cannot save the same user twice. It's good, like you can either leave it like this, or you can do an extra check here, like check if user is already saved, then don't try to save it again. But nonetheless, it's not gonna break anything, like it's just the API will detect that the ID is the same and it's not gonna save it the second time. So perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. If I refresh the application now, I don't know why I don't see it here. Come on, it should be in the... Yeah, after a couple of refresh, it appeared there. So that's basically this use effect, and all of this code is to simply connect our Cognito user, which is our authentication layer, with our database user. And now if we go to the Cognito user, if we take its ID from here, we can simply go into the content under the users, and if we search this ID, it's right away here. Like that's the approach we're going to take in our application later to get information from the database about our user. We're going to take first of all the authenticated user, and then searching by ID in our API, like using our API, we're going to get the information about him. All right, hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully I managed to make it look easier than it actually is. And let's check our poll. What's there? Did I include only? No, yeah, 78% of people want to do that. Okay, interesting. Let me actually add it to our ideas. Come on. Okay, thank you very much for the idea. About my saying, you're the reason I learned React Native CLI, by the way. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Should I learn AWS? I know React and I'm learning Django. It depends on your goals, really. Like if you want to stay focused on building like front end, in that case, AWS, you don't need AWS. However, if you also want to cover the backend and also infrastructure, or if you're working on your own projects and you have to manage everything yourself, like from designing, building the user interface to deploying and managing the backend. In that case, I think AWS is a very, very good skill for you. Like when I was working at my startup, I was working a lot with AWS. That's how I learned it. And after that, I also got AWS certified. And that actually opened the door to a lot of new opportunities for me, like being AWS certified. I would appreciate looking at some of your application that you deployed on AWS with a backend on AWS Amplify. Do you have them running? If you can give me a link. I don't have a lot of in production applications at the moment with AWS Amplify. Hello, Jeremy. How are you doing? All right. Whew. Let's go. Let's continue because we still have things to do. What's going to be the next step? So we query the users on the home screen. We query the details of a user on their profile. We sync the authenticated user with this user. I think the next step is related to our posts. So the first step is creating a post, right? Creating here a post. That one should be quite easy. But yeah, like we're not gonna cover images yet. We're only gonna cover the posts. So let's go ahead in our application, new post screen. And here we have the logic for this form, creating a post. We're gonna save a post in the database using data store. Yeah, like from now on, we're only gonna use data store, hopefully. we're not gonna get into any limitations. So let's go ahead and import data store from AWS Amplify and the post model, post from source models. Now, when the user presses this post button, let's go ahead and call, before actually here, we're gonna do await data store dot save. This is going to save a new post in the database, and we need to create this new post. And what we need to do is provide the details about the new post. So what information should a new post have? It should have text. For now, it should only have text. No, it also should have the user ID, which is required. So as you remember, when we designed the data model, we created a relationship between the user to the post. That automatically added this user ID, which is a relationship source, and this user ID is a required field. And also likes is a required field. So besides the text, we need likes can be 0 and user ID. Oh, come on, where is it? Yeah, here, user ID. Okay, but where do we get this user ID? Well, we can get it from our authentication layer. And this is where you will start seeing why we had to synchronize the database ID of a user with the authentication layer ID of a user. Because in this moment, we cannot query, we don't know what is the user in the database, but we can go ahead and easily get the information of the authenticated user using the import use authenticator from AWS Amplify UI React Native. And here at the top of a file, we can do use authenticator. And can we get the sub directly? No, we can get user, and that user should have sub. Does it? Let me check. Console log user. Let me check what information about the user we know from there. If I write something, I'll post. Yeah, this is all the information about the user. And does it have a sub? It has a username. Let me do console log json.stringify to see it in a better way. Yeah, it has attributes. Yeah. Maybe we can get attributes right away. Use authenticator. I'm just checking. Yeah, so I'm gonna keep it simple, and maybe there is a better way, but if I do console log user.attributes.sub, that's exactly what I need. Post, yes, this is the ID of a user, so I can use this user attribute sub here to link the post that we are creating with the user that is submitting the post, that is authenticated. So now if I do hello, this is the first post, and if I create it, let's go ahead in our content tab to see if it was successfully created. Yes, I see it. If I open, we see hello, this is the first post. For the user ID, we see that it ends with 32, and this is exactly the ID of my user from here, 32. Perfect. So that means that we have successfully saved a post and linked it to a user. Now, if I'm gonna go to my account here, let me go ahead and console log what information do we receive there on this page. For example, on user ID here, let me do console log JSON stringify user. This is the information, but it doesn't have information about the posts, right? No, it doesn't. But that means that we will have to query posts separately. So we're going to have a new state variable for our posts, set posts, use state, and in the same use effect where we are querying the user, let's go ahead and query posts that are submitted by that user. So we're going to do datastore.query post, and then let's do then set posts. We can delete this import from assets, and if I open it up right now, let me change the isubscribe to true in order not to have to press on that button always. And we have a problem there. Construct is not for a valid model. Post. Okay, this is coming from another part. It was imported wrongly. Oh, I shouldn't. Yeah. My component is also called post. So if I'm going to import post from here, I need to either rename one of them, like post as post model. And now I'm going to query the post model. And if I go to Vadim, cannot read property avatar of undefined. Undefined. Okay, let's console log posts. If we go there, we see this post, but no information about the user. In some cases, yeah, the problem right now is, let me just see if it works. So I'm gonna go in the components, posts. Let's do a question mark here because user in our case is undefined. Where else? User dot for the name as well, for the handle as well. Just for a moment to see, yeah, it displays, but not exactly how we wanted it. Because the data, when we query the list of posts, it does not include the information about the user. So I'm wondering if we are going to go to the data, and for the post, we can go with an easier route, and because we know like when we render it here, like we have information about the user. So besides the post, we can also send the user here equal user. And inside the post.js, I can take the user from the props and replace post.user with simply user. That's also gonna work. Because we know like if we're on this user's page, the post should be posted by him. Okay. And if I don't want more, it should be here. Why are not appearing right away? Okay, that's weird. In the database, it's there, but it doesn't appear right away. Oh, yeah, it's here. The problem with that we have at the moment is we didn't in the post.js where we have that image. Where is the image? We need to conditionally render it, because if the post doesn't have any image, we don't want to render like this blank empty space. So let's do post.image and render this one. Otherwise, don't render anything at all. And now, yeah, we're gonna have hello. This is the first post and the second post right away. Another thing that I want to show you, because at the moment, let me add some images here to the content. For example, to my account, user. Let's add an avatar. And a cover image. Yes, now it should look better. All right. Now, if I go to someone else, actually, it will render the same post as mine, but with only his data. The problem is that the way we are querying the posts is basically, like query all the posts from our database and display them as this user's post. Well, that's not exactly what we want. We want to do some filtering on that post to make sure that we are querying only the posts that are created by that user. Let me actually, I cannot stand this. I cannot stand this problem because it works like the way I sent the user here. It works, but it's misleading. Like it's not the way it's supposed to be. Because for example, here, this is a post created by me, but it's shown as it was created by Elon. So the proper way would be to actually go ahead and do another query here in the post to get the details about the user. So let's go ahead and with data store, we already remember how to do that. Use state And we will do in a use effect. It's just a couple of lines of code, but it's gonna make sure that it's the correct way. So in the use effect, we're gonna go data store dot query. We're gonna query the user model, and we're gonna use the ID post dot user ID. Does a post have this user ID? I hope it does. And after that, we're gonna set it in state, like set user. So now if I go here, make sure to import use state from React. Yes, it right away has the information about the user. And if I go to Elon Musk, the problem is still there that it displays my post, but it doesn't impersonate me. He doesn't impersonate me. So the information about the user inside the post component is actually queried and coming from the user that created that post. So now that's much better, and we can go ahead and handle the next problem of querying all the posts under this page. What we want to do is we want to provide a function that is going to allow us to filter posts. So for example, post dot user ID should be equal to the user dot ID, or the ID in general, ID. So let's try again. If I go to this page, it doesn't work. Let me double check that. So for data store, let's do predicates. Should be dot eq, user ID dot eq, and then providing the ID. Now if I go to my account, there is my post. If I go to other people account, they don't have posts yet. So that's the way we properly link profile page. The next step that I want to discuss is going to be handling images. And for that, we're going to need a new service to be set up in our Amplify Studio. And here I'm talking about the storage. Let's go ahead and set up the storage. And yeah, here, if you go to the setup storage, we can create a new S3 bucket. And the only thing that we need to do is to set up our authorization settings. For our signed in user, we want them to be able to upload, view, and also delete images. And for the guest users, let's only allow them to, not even view. Yeah, we want only signed in users to have access to files, because this is OnlyFans and who knows what information is there in the pictures. So let's go ahead and deploy our S3 storage. And in a moment, we're going to be ready to implement it in our application. So let's open the storage here, get started. Do we have to pay for using Amplify Studio? Using Amplify Studio, you need an AWS account. Creating an AWS account is free. Using AWS, the way AWS is priced in most of the cases is priced on demand. So it will charge you how much you are using some of the services. But AWS is offering a very generous free tier. So during while you're developing and playing around and learning AWS Amplify, you're not gonna get charged. So, okay. Too much information. Yeah. I want to run a poll. I'm really interested. What was your experience with Amplify documentation? If you ever used it. How do I do that? Come on. That's a Q&A? What? So while we are waiting for our bucket, our storage was already set up. So let's go ahead and pull the changes in our application. So let's copy that command here. And let me, before pulling everything, I'm gonna go ahead and do git add, git commit minus m data. Okay. Now let's go ahead and pull the changes from our Amplify. Okay, we see a new category being added here, the storage one. And we're gonna be ready to start uploading things to the storage. So let's go ahead and see how we can upload a file to S3 storage. And for that, we're gonna use the storage category. We're gonna use storage.put to provide the name of the file and the value, like the media, the images. And here in the documentation, we also had the code for React Native, and we removed it, of course. And it is very easy. Oh no, I think we can use this function to upload them. So from the documentation storage upload file, let's go ahead and try their example to use it in our app, new post, and here on this page. So we're gonna have this function. Let's put it somewhere here. Path to image file. No, let's call it upload image. Upload image. Response. Okay, path to image file. This one should be the URI of the image that we selected from state. So this image. Then we are transforming it to a blob and using the storage that should be imported. Let's go ahead and import it from AWS Amplify here. we are putting, we are doing storage.put, your key here. Later we're gonna update this, but let's just see that something is happening. And let's call this upload image before we are saving the information to data store. Because before we save it in the database, we need to upload the image. So upload image, and then we can save in database. We also need a wait here. Let's give it a try. So I will go ahead, new post. I'll select this beautiful image. And let's try to post it. Before we look into any data and so on, let's just go ahead in the file browser and see if we see any new images there. I'm gonna check the public folder, and here we see your key here. Perfect, that's exactly what we wanted. And if I download this image, it's gonna be this one that we selected here. The problem is that if I do it again and I upload a new one, it's gonna override this one because it's using the same key. So the thing is that the key of our file that we upload should be unique. To work with unique keys, we can use a library called UUID. And let's go ahead and install that in our application. Let me double check Expo. Maybe with Expo random. Let's try simply with UUID. So let's do npm install UUID v4. This is going to generate file names for us, unique file names. And let's try to import this UUID from this one. At the top, let's import UUID. And for our const file key, let's use a template string where the first part is this random string UUID, and after that we have dot, let's say PNG. Then we're going to use this file key as the key for our storage, and we can also return it back as file key, because in the onPost function we need this file key. Image key equal await upload image, and we can add it to our post as image is image key. Now I think we need to provide some polyfills for this one. UUID expo. Yeah, I think we need the my brain is fried already. Come on. Poly. Perfect. Oh, send help. Random UUID from crypto. Okay, let's go ahead and use actually crypto from Expo SDK. So let's install Expo Crypto. Instead of UUID, we're not gonna need UUID any longer. We're gonna let's copy it from here and install Expo Crypto in our application. And then we can simply import it at the top. And here let's call crypto.random UUID. Perfect. Let's see if it will work now. Let's upload a new post with an image. This one at this time. If I post it, okay, it finished. I think at the end here, we also should reset the image, set image. If I go to my account, there is something there, but we don't see it yet. So let's go ahead and see in our file browser. And here in the public, right away we see a new image. And it has this random UUID, and every time we will upload a new file, it's gonna have a different name. And if we copy this name and go to the content under the posts, this name is here for this image. So if I search it, right away we see it here. The thing is that when we're looking in the application, we don't see that image because it's before we were using here a full URL, but now we are using a key that represents the key of a file from our storage. So let's go ahead and look how we can download files. We can download files using the get method. And then we're gonna get basically the URL that we can display in the screen. So in our components, right? Source components, post, the image which is coming from post.image, we actually need to download this image. So let's go ahead and const have a state for image URI, set image URI equal use state, and here let's do use effect. In a use effect, every time the post.image changes, which is the image key in fact, we want to use the storage.get. Let's import storage from AWS Amplify. And storage.get post.image, and then we can set image URI. The last step is to actually go ahead and replace that one with image URI. For example, here, if image URI, the source is image URI, and check if it was fixed. Now all of them are displaying empty images because we initialize it with what? Well, we need the if statement here. If post.image only if post.image is defined, then try to download it. Okay, this works, and this also works. Perfect. Now we can go ahead and upload posts with images, and they will actually be rendered and displayed. So this one is perfect for OnlyFans. And we are waiting for the image to be sent, uploaded there, and after that is done, we can go ahead on the account of the user, and we see it right away here. Perfect. So that's how we can use the storage provider to upload images, to download them, to link them to our data from the database, and to display them in the application. Okay. So I think that's everything that I wanted to show you today. We covered quite a lot today. We started by setting up our AWS Amplify project. Then we went into configuring it and connecting with our React Native application, and right away started implementing the authentication layer. For that, we used the AWS Amplify UI library to have their default screens and components for the authentication screens. And after that, what we did was to build and design our data model because we need data fetched from a database. So that's what we did next. We fetched the data from the database. We displayed it in our application. And lastly, we set up our storage layer to be able to upload and download files from the cloud that are stored in the S3 bucket. We connected everything together, and in the end, we have this beautiful application that not only looks good, but also is actually working. And people now can sign up, create an account, start uploading pictures in the application. I hope you enjoy. Let me know if you would be interested in some extra features for this application, if we should do one more video for this. And if there is enough demand, we will continue with this project. For now, what was your experience? I did a poll with what was your experience with AWS Amplify, and 22% of people said good, it was clear, 33 said it was confusing, and 44 didn't use it. Interesting. If you're watching it afterwards, let me know actually in the comments. I'm curious, what is your experience with the documentations? So we need the credit card details, and if we use more than the free tier, then we will be charged. Yes, something like that. All right, guys. So thank you very much for staying with me till the end. I'm going to see you next Friday. At the same time, we're going live every single week on Fridays with a new project. So if you're interested in learning mobile development, make sure to subscribe to the channel down below. Turn on the notification bell not to miss our Friday builds. And I will see you soon. Bye-bye, guys.